Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got a full review to do for you on this guy. This is the Benchmade 940. This one particularly is just the 940. There's no dashes, no extra anything going on. This isn't an exclusive from anyone, a sprint run. This is the standard 940. And I've spent a little over a week with this guy. I've carried it quite a bit. I've carried it as a primary and as a secondary because it's small and comfortable enough that I can carry it as a secondary. So I've carried it in both applications and I've used it a fair bit. This knife belongs to my buddy YD Knives, who has loaned me this knife along with several others that I currently have right now. He's loaned me others in the past that I've already sent back to him, and he's sending me more very soon. So I'm going to link to him down in the description. Please give him a follow on Instagram. Awesome dude. Great knife collection. He's buying and selling knives a lot, so you may see knives that you want to buy from him. He's just somebody worth following, in my opinion, and he's been super supportive to my channel. So this is his user 940, and he told me when he sent it I could carry and use this one. So the only thing not normal about this 940 is that it has a mini deep carry clip on it, which if I had a 940, that would be the first thing I'd do to it as well. So I'm judging it based on that. And he said he actually swapped the springs in here as well. I didn't dig on that. I think somebody asked me after one of my videos on this knife what they were. I still don't know. If you want to know, his description to his Instagram is down below. Message the guy. I don't know what springs he put in here, but they're a little bit more robust than the typical Omega springs. They're not hard to actuate at all. They're still very smooth, but they do feel just a little bit more, a little stronger than a typical Omega spring. So take that for what it's worth. This was an interesting one for me because I explained before, and I don't want to totally just repeat myself in every video that I do of this knife, but the 940 is a model that is a benchmark in the EDC community. There are people who are not knife guys at all who own 940s and have carried them every day for years and love them, and it's their one knife and it functions great day after day for 10, 15, 20 years. It is a solid built, really well made knife, generally. Does Benchmade struggle with QC every now and then? Absolutely. I've fallen victim to Benchmade QC. Are there issues sometimes with these knives? Yes, but on the whole, these are a staple in the EDC realm, and they have been for a while. So it's one of those knives that for a long time before I was deep in the hobby, it was almost like a kind of a grail, like an entry grail for me, where when I was only buying budget pieces, this is like a grail doesn't have to mean $1,000 knife. This was kind of a grail. But then by the time that I was able to get one, by the time that I was spending that much money on knives comfortably or even uncomfortably, like stretching myself to it, it became not exciting enough for me to actually get one. Part of it could be how many people already have them, and part of me, I don't want to sound like a hipster, but part of me likes having things early or things that are different, and it's exciting to me to have gear that's not what everybody else has, and it seems like everybody has a 940 in some variant. It just became not exciting enough for me to justify getting one, and these are not cheap. I don't necessarily think that they're super overpriced, but especially these variants that are aluminum and S30V, they're pretty pricey in this day and age for what you're getting materials wise, and the ones with better materials are drastically marked up. It's not like oftentimes people like put this head to head with the PM2 because that's Spyderco's kind of flagship model if this is Benchmade's, right? And they're both about the same cutting edge ish, and they're both like EDC focused. Anyway, with the PM2, if I get a sprint run like my Scorpion, the exclusive River's Edge Cutlery Scorpion PM2 that I have in 10V blade steel, which is far and away better than S30V and is better, in my opinion, than anything offered on any Benchmade 940 ever to this point, that knife was less than this version of this knife. It cost a couple dollars more than a base S30V G10 PM2 because the exclusives aren't like crazy. Whereas if you want to get a 940-1 and get carbon fiber and S90V, it's going to set you back drastically more than this, way more than that PM2. Are there differences in the construction of the knives? Sure, that's another conversation. But my point is, these don't start cheap, and getting them nicer, they go up quite a bit. And even some of the like limited runs and stuff, they can be very expensive knives, these 940s. So I've been curious about it for a long time because I'd handled them here and there, and I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of what the knife was, but I'd never carried one and never used one. So I wanted to spend some time with it, putting it through its paces and seeing how it did for me, because the dimensions of this knife make it very comfortable, very good to carry, and the history of this knife and how many people like would pick it as their, like, if I had to sell my whole collection and only keep one knife to use forever, this would be it, because it's a great all-arounder. I don't feel like after spending this time with it, it's probably been more like 9 or 10 days now, and I've carried it at least 5 or 6 times for entire days at a time, and I've used it a fair bit. I've felt like I've tested it, and I've gotten a good sense of how it cuts, what types of activities it excels at, and what it doesn't do great at, and it's just fine. I don't feel like it's anything special. I feel like it's one of those knives that when it came out was really, really nice, and it built a following. And it still has that following, and a lot of people recommend it because when they got theirs, they loved it so much. And it's almost like I did a video on the Tenacious the other day, and someone commented this very similar thing. I forget who it was, I apologize, but they made a mention of how a lot of people, like, one of their first knives that they would consider a nicer knife was a Tenacious, and they liked it, so they keep recommending it to people. And then a lot of people end up getting them because of that cycle. Meanwhile, there's a ton of better stuff out there that just doesn't get recommended as much, but this has a butterfly on it, and Benchmades are sold in a ton of places. You can buy this knife at a sporting goods store or a gun store, and so people buy this, and it might be their first and their only nice knife, and then because they like it, they never keep going further to find out what more there is, and then they keep recommending this knife and giving it to people as gifts, and then there's this cycle of tons of 940s being out there, and in my opinion, it's just pretty good. I think there are so many options that now after, I've already demonstrated, I've never bought one. I've bought plenty of knives at this point at or above this price range. I could have bought a 940 so many times with how much money I've spent on knives over the past couple of years. I've never wanted to. And then now after having one, I still kind of don't want to. I shouldn't say I never wanted to. I was always curious, and I was close so many times to getting one, but it just never quite got there for me. And it's still the same thing after having it. It's just not quite there for me. Like, I respect this knife because it is well made, and it does function really well, and it carries really well, and it's not too heavy. But it's just, I don't know, lately I found myself really enjoying things that are more specified in their purpose, that are more designed to do a specific thing and to do it well. And this knife just feels too much like an all-arounder to me in a lot of ways. It's not thin behind the edge. How could it be? It's this really narrow blade, which makes it more pocketable, but it's not like a Supreme slicer, not even close. It's sharp, this one is, and it's got a good edge on it, and S30V is fine. It's just okay. The blade is okay. I like the shape. Reverse Tanto gives me a pretty good tip. It's not the most robust tip in the world, but for an EDC knife, it's a great tip. It's going to be good at piercing tasks. It's got that little bit of curve there. Like, the blade shape is pretty good. I have no real complaints about it, but it's thick behind the edge. I guess that's a complaint. Like, this isn't going to be a slicing dream. It's also not really, like, robust either, because it's still a thin little thing. So it's like, as an outdoor knife, it kind of falls apart in my opinion. Plus, I generally am not huge on axis locks for like hard use outdoor knives. Like, I don't know. Even at Benchmade, there's just so many better things today, in my opinion. I recently fell in love with the Super Freak, which is M4 and G10. And it's really cool G10 at that. And then they made the Mini Super Freak, or the Mini Freak -1, whatever you want to call it, with carbon fiber and S90V. And that knife costs more than this, and it's more in the range of the Benchmade 940-1. But I would take a Mini Freak over this in pocket. It's more comfortable to me. I like the tallness of that blade. I like that it's slicier. I'd take the Super Freak over this one if I don't know. If I could only have a Benchmade, I wouldn't pick this one, let alone all the other knives out there. And so it's not even necessarily that I'm disappointed in the 940. It's just kind of that I've had it like a little bit confirmed, I think, what I was suspicious of for a long time, that it's one of those knives that people like for a reason. It deserves to be liked, but I don't know that it deserves to still be looked at as a benchmark in today's day and age. I think it's been surpassed by a number of its competitors. And to be fair, some of that is probably preference. I think a lot of people would say that about the Spyderco ParaMilitary too. But to me, the PM2 is still one of my favorite knives because I love the way that blade functions for what I like to do with that knife. I love the way it carries. I like the ergos. I like the materials it comes in. I love that I can get crazy awesome blade steels for relatively inexpensive. Other people don't like the PM2 at all though. And they don't understand why there's this huge following behind the PM2. And I'd imagine the following behind the 940, if you were to like actually be able to tell size of each of those knives followings, it's probably about the same as the PM2. There's a ton of guys who fall in the Benchmade 940 camp. There's a ton of guys who fall. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn on airplane mode and my phone somehow rang up here. Anyway, there's the Benchmade camp and the Spyderco camp, and it's oftentimes the 940 versus the PM2. And I get that there are imperfections, according to a lot of people, with the PM2. And I can admit it's not a perfect knife, but that's definitely more my speed than this one. Like I wasn't wrong in getting into Spyderco compared to this, because comparing it to my PM2, like it's so clear to me which one I would prefer to have. And I guess that's kind of going to be my full review of this. If you don't know much about the 940, go watch someone's video who's going to explain to you a ton about the knife. But I feel like it's a really well-established knife at this point. Most people are pretty well aware of what it's about. This was more an exercise to find out whether I fell in love with it, and I just haven't. I haven't fallen in love with it. I don't feel the need to go out and buy one. Even if I found one for a great deal that would have been hard to pass up before having done this, I think now I'd probably pass on it, because I don't see myself, like, I never wanted to carry this. After like 2 days in, it was like, I got to keep carrying the 940. I got to put it in my pocket for another day. And then like I'd find stuff to do with it. And it's not that it's a bad knife. It did everything fine. It carries well. It really is a good knife. But I feel like for its cost and based like where that puts it with its competition, it needs to be great. The $200-ish knife range at this point, there's greatness in that category. Some of it is even coming from Benchmade. Like a Super Freak compared to a 940 to me is a no-brainer. I would much rather have the Super Freak. If you fall in a different preference range, then that's up to you. But for my preferences, I just don't love the 940 like a lot of people do. So I'm going to be sending this back to YD Knives in the next day or two. Before I do that, I'm going to film a comparison between this and the ProTech Malibu Reverse Tanto, because I think you guys would enjoy seeing that. I think it's worth showing because the ProTech Malibu isn't more expensive than this, I don't think, compared to this basic version. I'll talk about that in the video. I'll look up the prices on both before I do it, hopefully, if I remember. But they're both reverse tantos. They're both aluminum scales. One's a button lock, one's an axis lock, so a little different there. One's a flipper, one's thumb studs. But overall, they're similar price range, US made, EDC knives with, in this case, deep carry clips on both of them. They both carry pretty slim and pretty well, and I think they deserve to be put up against each other. And I think you're going to see that, at least from where I sit, it's going to be, I'll have to see how it ends up actually scoring out, but I can't imagine that this knife will really beat the Malibu in pretty much any category. And the Malibu just came out. It's a brand new offering. It should beat something that was designed 20 years ago. That should be the reality. But I am willing to bet a lot of 940 fanboys will have a lot of trouble admitting that a brand new ProTech button lock flipper is a better knife than a 940. But I can tell you definitively right now, I would buy a lot of ProTech Malibus before I'd buy one 940. That's the way I feel about it. So be on the lookout for that video. Thank you again to YD Knives for lending this knife to me, trusting me to carry it and use it and see what it's made of. I appreciate that he was willing to do that. So show him some support. Follow him on Instagram. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble talking right now. Anyway, this is the Benchmade 940, and to me, it's meh. It's fine. It's a good knife. It's not a bad knife, but I wouldn't buy one personally. So there you have it.